Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome, I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. An accomplished entrepreneur and inspirational author, today's guest left the comforts of her corporate job for her miracle more than 16 years ago and hasn't looked back. In her book, Blues to Blessings, Moving from Fearful to Fateful, she helps her readers move from complacency and dissatisfaction to fulfillment and transformation. She also produces and hosts a devotional podcast called Be Moments, which airs daily on Moody's Urban Praise radio station. She holds an MBA from the Kellogg Graduate School of Management, Northwestern University, and she and her husband have 3 sons and live in Chicago. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Suzette Webb.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you for having me today. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Our first question, Suzette, on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
Yes, and that's simple for me because, Julia, I felt like I had a really good story to tell, one that would make a difference in the lives of others, but I did not see myself as a writer. Commonplace to be. I have something to say. I believe it will really benefit others, but I didn't see myself as a writer. So I thought, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it the right way. I thought about even saying, well, maybe I'll have a ghostwriter. But then that didn't settle with me and said, girl, sit down. If you got the story, he will get you through how to get it all finished.
Well, once you decided you had to write the book, how did you proceed? Did you follow a traditional path to publishing or a different one?
No, I followed a different one because I tell you, when I realized that this was something that I was going to do, I said, and I actually had a little vision. I said, you know what? These guys are going to give me a jingle one day. They're going to call me and say, Suzette, let me do this. So I figured, one of the things that was important to me was to have the most authentic voice possible. My editor told me early on in the process that you're trying to put a bow around the end of each chapter. And I don't know your story back then as you're telling it today, but I know writing and I know life. And once I was confident enough to just proceed forward in my authentic voice, I decided to do everything, as you would have it, in my authentic voice, down to the publishing. I said, listen, I'll start an entity and I'll publish under a business name. I own my own ISBNs and I will just do it. And I will get out there and push it enough. And then, maybe one day a New York Times publisher or some major publishing house. Now, having said that, if I wanted a major publishing house to call me, then it had to be major publishing house quality. And so I decided to do that. And I will say it's currently earning 5 stars on Amazon. So I must have gotten a couple of things right.
You are doing something right.
Yeah.
Do you consider this work a self-help book?
I kind of, I think that genre is a little bit overused, but it is a book about personal reflection. I tell my story in hopes that it will inspire readers, and I think it does, to reflect on their own. In the book, you see me fall down many times, but each time getting back up stronger. And it's a spiritual book, so each time I'm getting up stronger. It's not in my strength; it's in, I believe, God's strength. He's guiding me, leading me, and so on. And so that's the hope of it. In fact, that's one of the pieces about it is I think it's an interactive book. So it's really about asking my reader to reflect on their own story and trials.
You really serve as a coach to guide people through the process of your 4 steps.
I think I like that better than yes. Yes, I do, because we all have, different stories. I often say sometimes, pain can look different in each person's life, but pain in a sense is all the same, right? So my journey and my experience may look different, or my story may look different than yours, but the pain part is all the same.
I found that in my own life, all the tough times that I went through, I always find a way to share with someone else who's going through that as well. So sometimes that gives us a lot of courage to be able to do that.
It does. And it also makes our experience feel all the more purposeful, which was really important to me. Like, if I'm going through something, let me go through it for a reason, which I think is a part of the suffering process, right? It is about growing and getting better, but also letting others benefit or helping others to benefit from what you've learned and experienced.
And something good can come from something bad.
Hence the title, Blues to Blessings.
Well, when I hear that title, I grew up in Mississippi, and when I hear the word blues, I think of music, but that's not the meaning of this book, is it?
No, it is not. No, no. And guess what? I grew up right next door because I live in Chicago today, but my home is New Orleans.
Oh, well, that's where I was born. So we're kindred spirits.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. But blues comes from just, feeling blue. And it's a cliche that is often used. Sometimes it can be overused. But when we talk about, glass half empty, half full, with me, it's always half full. Um, and when you can look at something and say, I'm going through this. And then when you look at it from a spiritual perspective, I'm going through this because, God is preparing me, or he's teaching me. It's you will benefit in some form or fashion. So the story never ends with the blues. If you keep pressing, keep coming full circle, you will get to the blessing. And there's so many lessons sometimes in a blessing. So,
well, Suzette, tell us a little bit more about the book and read a section so that we can hear your tone and voice.
yes. Well, I will say that the book was written at a time when I had more questions than I did answers about my life. I could tell you what I didn't want to do. And I see myself as a very positive person, right? But I was doing things that I knew that I could do, but my heart just wasn't in it. And I think what best describes, we've heard, Julia, a lot in the news about the Great Resignation. And I was just on a show a couple of months ago where I talked about, I really felt like it was more of a great reflection. And so I know you will allow authors sometimes to read some of their work. And I thought maybe I might, in describing the book, puts you right in the center of what I was feeling at the time. And then it is also an excerpt from the book. So I can share that whenever you're ready.
We love that.
Let me start by sharing, this is what I was feeling at the time. By my late 30s, I appeared to be living the dream. I had a loving husband, 3 amazing sons. We lived in a pretty good neighborhood, and I had a promising job from which I could retire. Although my life looked right to others, it didn't feel right to me. I often felt trapped between who society said I should be and who I was created to be. Let me ask you, are you willing to press past your own uncertainty in search of what might be missing in your life? Or will you keep pretending you already found it? Even though I was very grateful for the life I had, especially with my family, I knew something else was missing. I liken my feelings to a good pot of gumbo. I live in Chicago today, but New Orleans is my home, and I know a thing or two about how to cook a good pot of gumbo. And so after I'm nursing my pot for a few hours and the smell of fresh seafood is all through the house, I dip my spoon in for a taste only to sense something is missing. How could this be? I followed all the steps, took no shortcuts, used high quality ingredients, yet the taste is still off. This is exactly how I felt about my professional life at the time. I followed all the rules, invested in my education, put in the long hours, waited my turn, yet nothing had claimed me and nothing had called me. One day, during one of my lowest points and just desperate for a sliver of hope from anywhere, I created a vision board and I asked Andrea, dear friend and colleague, to share her thoughts. And boy, did she share her thoughts. Now, I forgot to factor in that Andrea holds a PhD in psychology, so nothing is merely black and white to her. Andrea seems to be studying the woman in the center of my board. Just above her picture, I have the words "Be excellent" in all capital letters. And to the left of her picture is the number 10. Andrea points to my board and asks, Suzette, why did you choose this woman? Because, Andrea, it looks like she's in some type of prison facility and I have a positive message for her. She asks a few more questions and then drops her bomb on me. Suzette, the woman in the center of this board is you. I feel jolted in the moment. Eyes well up with tears. And Andrea puts her hand on my shoulder, looks me in the eye, and says, Suzette, I've been your friend for a number of years. I watch you put this extraordinary pressure on yourself to fit in, to achieve, to excel, to be just what you placed on that board, a 10. Maybe the uplifting message you have for the woman in the center of your board is really what you want to say to yourself. I wanted more, but I feared where the road to more would lead. I feared disappointing those closest to me. I feared digging deep and opening old wounds. But that whisper of that still small voice kept getting louder and louder. It's time to move on from what you've outgrown. It's time to move on from what you've outgrown. So my question back then may be your question today. Are you willing to press past your own uncertainty in search of what may be missing in your life? Or will you keep pretending you already found it? Put another way, will you put the lid back on your gumbo pot, missing ingredient and all, and say, it's good enough? And this is an excerpt from the book. This is the part of my journey I call Dreaming from Prison, and it is chapter 4. And as you could see, that was a really, I extracted parts of that from chapter 4. So there's a lot more detail in the vision board exercise and all of that. But for brevity purposes, I just took out the highlights of chapter 4.
Suzette, that is a powerful message. And I think all of us as women can listen to that message and take heed, because many of us have been there or may still be there. And I love your analogy of the gumbo pot. I think that makes it
Yes.
very visual for us.
Yes, yes. Because you know what it's like to cook something and you taste it and you say, no, something is missing. And I thought I followed this recipe to a T.
Mhm.
And that's what happens in life. We think we're living, we check off all the boxes. My belief, Julia, is that the same voice that's telling you, maybe nudging you, hey, kiddo, it's time to move on from what you've outgrown, is also the same voice. It's not going to leave you hanging. It's not going to nudge you and say it's time to move on with no direction, with no guidance. It's also wanting to tell you what's next in store. So I have learned to listen.
It's like that old saying about, when the door closes, there's going to be another one to open. And I believe
That's right.
that's true.
That's right.
Well, how are you marketing this book? Do you have a publicist?
I have a couple of colleagues from Kellogg who will play around with it. I have another dear person who, from a PR perspective, another fine young lady, Carrie Burnham, who is a master when it comes to Amazon and running ads. And I've tried to play around with that a little bit. But what I've learned in business is what you know, and what you don't know, you farm out to somebody else. And that is, I just don't even have the time for it. And the algorithms at Amazon are constantly changing. So why don't you let somebody else who knows that and stays on top of it do it? So I've had such a pleasure with working with her. But beyond that, I'm often asked to speak to women's groups, and I will market the message and the book in that way. And so that's what I've been doing, and I find it to be so relevant now because many of us, we talk about that great resignation, which I will continue to refer to as the great reflection, because I think we've left the workplace for obvious reasons, burnout. But then, we will also, there's something else I think percolating beneath the surface there, because with last year 2021 over 40 million people left, with women leading the way. So something else is, she's searching for something.
I think a
And I
lot of
think
a lot of people are searching and they can't find what's going to make them happy. And I think it comes
that's
from
right.
much deeper than, the outside world for sure.
That's correct. Absolutely.
Are you working on anything else?
I have just been I am a regular now, a regular guest on the Morning Blend show, and I'm very excited about that. So working on content there. I have a weekly podcast that is heard on Moody Radio here in Chicago, on the urban praise arm of Moody Radio. And just more exciting things. I'm not yet at book number 2. Um, but I think the next book would be a compilation of my daily meditations and weekly meditations that I put out. Blues to Blessings is such an interactive book that I think that there could be a nice complement study guide and journal to go with that. So there are some options out there, but I think the content here, and one distinction, Julia, that I like the audience to know, your listeners to know, is that as much as it is a spiritual book, it's also around personal development too. So some people shy away from books saying, well, I haven't been to church since Hector was a pup. So it may not be for you. And it's actually very much for that person, you know?
Yes, I believe that. A lot of people say they're spiritual, but not religious. And, the
That's
terms
correct.
get a lot confusing, but I think we are all on the search for the same thing. We just don't know it, or we find it at different stages in our life. And I can't imagine a better mentor than you for our listeners. So I hope that they'll pick up that book and really dive into it. I look forward to buying my copy. I buy a book of all the podcast guests that I have, and that's just, been a blessing for me.
Yes. Well, that's so kind of you. Thank you.
What other kinds of books do you enjoy? Or do you have anything you would recommend to our listeners, or do you have time to read?
Well, I'm reading two now, and the author's name escapes me. It's a book called The Sabbath. And on the top, by the title, you would think it's heavily religious. It's not. It is really just taking that time, stepping back, and getting really quiet and tapping into your higher power. For me, that's Christ, but for others, it's not. But tapping into that, and it too is an interactive book. The other one is, now, in terms of an author, and I have female authors that I absolutely love and read, but Mitch Albom, I have a place in my heart for him because he is always putting God as the stranger, as the person we shouldn't abandon. He as we often, as is it is written, that whatsoever you do to the least of my brother, that you've done to me. And so he always drills it down to just the everyday person. And he's got a book out, The Stranger in the Lifeboat. And and I think that's the measure that God, how are we treating our fellow brothers and sisters? How are we treating the widow, the orphan, the stranger? And I think that's really the compass that we should measure ourselves by. And so I think Mitch Albom just does a brilliant job. So The Stranger in the Lifeboat, I will be starting this week. I'm excited. And it's got amazing reviews on Amazon. It really is doing very well. He wrote his first one, Tuesdays with Maury, and that one was so great.
Everybody loved it.
Everybody loved that one.
How did you order your book, Blues to Blessings? Did you start it chronologically, or did you take sections that just were topical that meant something to you?
Yeah, well, it is a 4-step process. First step being around awareness, recognizing that something is not right, something is missing. As I just kind of read an excerpt that is from section 1 of the book, and this is when I have more questions than I do answers. I'm walking around saying, "What about me? What about me?" And but the second part of the book is around preparation. I'm realizing that I have these questions, but God is preparing me for something more. The third phase is around transformation. This is a period when I want to go forward. All I want to do is just move on. And I would first have to go back before I could go forward. But I wouldn't be going back alone. I had some things that I had to deal with in my past that I had to, as I would say, confront the complexities of my life. And some of those stem back to childhood. But I would do that. And then the fourth and final phase is all around service. So now that you've done this work and you're being prepared, your story isn't just about you anymore. It's about, and I tell this story in 4 phases against the backdrop of the life cycle of a butterfly, which is also in 4 phases. And so when a butterfly emerges from the chrysalis and goes out into the world, it's bringing beauty into the world. It's no longer just about that butterfly. And so I think we all have an inner butterfly, if you will, within us. It's just dying to flourish. And we've been on this treadmill of life. We've been going, doing. The pandemic hits and it causes it to stop and to slow down. And it causes us to reflect and to say, are our actions commensurate with our words? Because we talk a lot about what we value and what we desire. But when we look at how we're spending our time, the things that we say we value, we're not really spending a lot of time doing. So I think that those things are to have that time to just reflect, reassess, refresh are all important.
That is very important. And we, as a writing group over the age of 50, are certainly a unique group. And I wonder if you have advice for our writers.
Well, I do. I thought about that. And I think it's so there are a couple of pieces of advice. First, that voice of doubt will creep in. Will it? When it does, because it will whisper to you, you're over 50. What are you thinking about? You've never written a book. It'd be fine if you had maybe even written something in your 20s or 30s, and this was your second book, but you're starting something new in your 50s. Girl, please sit down and just hear that voice and keep moving. Keep moving beyond that voice. That's just doubt creeping in. That's just a part of the process. Recognize it for what it is and pick up that pen, make a commitment, and get started. Now, when you pick up that pen, I think it's really important to ask two very, very important questions. And I think these questions are important for any author. And the first is, why do you want to write the book? Now, I could answer that in two ways. What I'm really asking are, what are your intentions? Because in life, and by the time you get in your 50s, you have a few. We all have naysayers. We talk about the doubt we feel within, but we all have people who have doubted us. The mouths of my naysayers, those who had doubted me previously. Let me show you. Oh no, you about to see my book up on, Amazon or wherever, picked up by New York Times publishing house, etc. I would tell you that may be a part of your process too. Recognize it for what it is and release it. Because if your intentions stay there, you're putting a stain on your work before you even start. So being rock solid clear about why you want to write the book. And then the second important question is, now that you're clear on why you want to write, who would want to read your book? And now your process, you're working for them. You're talking about everything from that person's aspirations, desires, goals, problems, barriers, issues, and how do you reach them? You're speaking directly. You're not talking around. You're speaking directly to your reader. And that will be very validating for them. And they will feel like, finally, someone is speaking my language. Finally, a book comes along that is just speaking to my heart. I haven't heard anyone else put it like that. That's what will happen. So that is, and then two other pieces of practical advice, very quick, is a great editor. Any writer needs a great editor. And one lesson learned for me, I thought one editor is one size fits all. And we all know now, if you're a writer, that's not. So your developmental editor has a very different skill set than your copy editor. And I think if you value your work because your girlfriend is also a third grade teacher who says, I'll edit it for you, you might say, well, you can be one of my beta readers. But I think if you're going to invest the time, I would certainly invest a little bit more and get a good editor. And finally, I think my fourth and final tip, I don't think people use Amazon enough. It is an amazing research tool. If you want to know if a title is taken, put it into the search bar at Amazon. If you want to know what genre you should place your book in, they have a ton of genres, a number of genres. Oh, I can't even name them all on Amazon. And then competitive pricing. You know, if you're writing a cookbook, any kind of book, right? And you've got a competitive title and you are pricing your book above a person who's already a best-selling author and you're a first-time author out the door. So it's just a lot of free information that only takes time by using Amazon as a research tool. That's something I wished someone had told me more about, or I'd learned more earlier on in the process.
Well, Suzette, you know, you're such an inspiring woman to so many people and have given us a lot to think about today. Who inspires you?
Oh my goodness. You know, I would say, and I have to think about that for a moment because I have so many people who inspire me. Authors, family, my children, my husband, you know, and isn't that something? I'm like, I'm not going to just one point. Sometimes just a friend may say something to me that, oh my goodness, what you said really touched me or something. And I get my inspiration there, but I think I really gain inspiration from every place I can.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end our chat today. I appreciate you so much, and we're so proud that you're now one of our authors over 50.
Yes, I'm delighted, Julia, to be here with you. And don't hesitate to give a jingle back. And I can't wait to see the airing of this.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.